My name is Chris Clark. From the list here, I recognize most of the names as clients of ours. We're an ArchiCAD reseller for the last 22 years in the Intermountain West. A lot of you know that we really focus on the business side of the technology, but what's really great about CVG and what they do, and we'll be joined by Todd and Emily here in just a minute, is they're really focusing on the business side, more on the front side. We're obviously on the technology side. CVG works with several ArchiCAD users in our area and throughout the country. So we were really motivated when we saw them to create a dialogue and to get them in contact with our clients that are interested in learning from people that have extensive backgrounds, not only in architecture, but in business, because it seems like a lot of our clients, including myself, I have a degree in architecture, but not so much a degree in business. So with that being said, I'm going to turn over to Todd and Emily. I'm just going to kind of sit in the background. They'll take you through a short presentation. You can put questions in the chat, and they will be following up with those. And if you guys are interested, please reach out to them after for further dialogue based on your individual needs if it's not something they covered here. So I will turn it over to Emily and Todd.
Yeah, we're going to talk to you today about some lessons that we've learned over the years. Emily's been in the field of architecture all of her career. She's done virtually every job in an architecture firm that you can imagine, except being an architect. I cannot draw anything. I'm not a designer in any way, shape, or form. I'm a serial entrepreneur, MBA from Northwestern, and have been running Charette Venture Group since January of 2015. There are 10 of us on this team. We are completely virtual. We've been using Zoom since we very first started. And so the pandemic, although it's impacted all of our lives, it has not really impacted the way we work, except for eliminating travel. We're an assortment of a team of people who cover all different kinds of expertise, from graphic design, web development, financial planning. Rena Klein is our operational guru and ownership transition person. But the point is, we cover all of the aspects of running a business, a small architecture firm. We cover the business side of that. Unlike Chris, we are not experts on the technical side. We certainly know many of the technologies that small firms use, but none of us are technical experts in any way. We look to people like Chris to help our firms with technology. And as I said, the services that we do are all across the board, and we often get asked what kind of services we provide, and it's a question we almost can't answer. Literally was involved in a marital counseling session last Saturday between a husband and wife owner that were disagreeing about a particular issue, and they said, we need to get Todd in on this. I could never have put that on the list of services we provide at the beginning. But basically, it's, we're a group of people that help firm owners run their business, and we have a lot of expertise in a lot of different areas. Our clients are, we refer to our clients as investment partners, because we have an ironclad contract with them, and they're spread all over the country, everything from 3 people to 20, covering all different kinds of practice, and in both rural and metropolitan settings, all across the board. So that's us. Let me stop sharing and back to the main screen, and I'll turn it over to Emily.
Sure, thanks. Well, we get asked a lot of questions from small business leaders about how to run their business, HR, operations, finance, marketing, branding. And we typically, we have half-hour coaching sessions, and we're happy to do that with any of you who are on this call. I'll post the link towards the end of the call, or you can always just email us. And basically, we'll answer any questions you have about running your firm. And in the process of doing that over many years, we have found that we get a lot of the same questions. So what we figured is we'd help pull together these questions in this very casual conversation. And I'm going to play the role of the firm leader and ask Todd many of the questions that we get. And we hope that you will chime in and offer your thoughts and ask questions in the Q&A window. If you hover your cursor down to the bottom of the screen, you'll see Q&A. And I'll be happy to field those questions as we go. Or if you'd like to save it for the end, we'll have a Q&A session then as well. So why don't we start with the first question that we get asked a lot. And that is, it's about talent recruitment. So finding intent and recruiting talent remains a top challenge for many small architecture firms. What have been your observations with recruiting and staffing relative to small firms?
You know, it's amazing that we're having this discussion in September. If you had asked me in March if we would even be talking about recruitment and retaining talent, I probably would have had a different reaction. But more than half of the firms that we work with are currently searching for talent. And fortunately or unfortunately, I'm the one who leads our recruitment efforts. We provide those services to all of our partners. And it's a lot of work, you know, a search for the right person is a lot of work. And while we're seeing all of these reports about layoffs and unemployment numbers, for small firms, it's still being very difficult to find the right person. My advice to you all that might be considering hiring is that you really try to avoid the trap of, I know John, I went to school with John, and I think John's looking for a job. We should hire John. You know, that's the easy thing to do. It's the tendency. Maybe you've worked with someone in the past that is out there looking, or maybe you've had a contractor working for you that you think you'd like to convert to a full-time position. None of those things are bad, but they tend to overlook some of the really important steps about stepping back and really evaluating your current talent pool, your current staff, and looking at your pipeline and your potential pipeline and understanding where you really need the most strength. You know, what is the greatest need of the firm in terms of seniority, ability to manage projects independently, or you need somebody to crank out drafting work or production work, you know, in a high speed environment. Just really need to step back and understand what does the firm need, then work on the position itself, describing it. And then once you've got that work done, you develop your advertisement. And I want to be clear that a job advertisement is not a job description. All too often firms will put up this elaborate job description with qualifications and requirements and all these scary words. And then they post that and wonder why they're not getting the applicants. You need a paragraph that is really compelling and sells your firm, talks about who you are and what your values are and what kind of talent you're looking for. I mean, the purpose of that ad is just to get people to apply, right? You can make a decision about whether the applicant has the proper skills or not, once they apply, but you want to have options. You want to build that candidate pool to be as large as you can. And then what we do is we go through, there are some obvious disqualifiers for some firms. There may be people that are living across the country and you're not interested in hiring people to move to your area, or maybe they don't know the software that you require them to know. So there's, you go through and weed out the obvious ones that you disqualify and just fire off a message and say, thanks, but we're going a different direction. Then you move into, we conduct what I call introductory calls. They're Zoom calls, and they're 15 or 20 minutes. And they're just, hey, I just want to make sure you understand this is a full-time job. You got to be in the office pre-pandemic. You got to be in the office, so here's some facts about the firm, ask them some questions. So you're in that screening call, you're just affirming that they can show up, that they can speak and communicate and ask good questions, and that they generally have the skills to achieve the job. And then from those notes, from those screening calls, you narrow it down into 2 or maybe 3 that you really want to have an in-depth meeting with. And, in today's world, that often is a Zoom call. In some cases, firms are bringing people into the office, wearing masks or putting in whatever kind of conditions are appropriate for the firm. And then to negotiate and get the right person and the most one for the job. So
great. Good. We'll just move on. If there aren't any questions, we'll just take questions at the end. So switching gears, let's talk about ownership transition a little bit. How and when should firms begin to plan for ownership transition? And why is not addressing this early in a firm's life cycle detrimental to the firm?
Yeah, so the answer to when is now, right? Like, you cannot start thinking about this stuff too early. I don't care how old or young you are. We do get calls from people, they're firm owners that are in their 60s, and they call us up and they're like, yeah, I've been sort of thinking about ownership transition. And, we're in the unfortunate place of looking at the firm and realizing it's, 10 years too late. I mean, you need to be developing young and new talent within your firm as you grow and thinking about who's going to be the future leaders of this firm, who's going to carry this forward. Now, this is assuming you want the firm to live beyond yourself. You know, there's nothing wrong with sole proprietors that practice for, you know, 30 or 40 years, and when they're done, they just turn off the lights and lock the door. But if you're trying to build an entity that you want to either sell or turn over to younger talent or bring on other owners, you've got to really be working on that very, very early in the game. And developing that talent and leadership means you've got to develop a culture of transparency where people understand, you know, what it means to run a business and what the mission of the business is and what the vision is, where you're going and what some of those goals are. But it's detrimental to the firm if you wait until it's too late. And if you've not really empowered younger talent to feel as though they have a place in that firm. I'm sure many of you have left firms and seen people leave your firm to go work at other places. And that's usually because we haven't done a good enough job really developing a culture of transparency that's engaging and shows them what it means to run a firm.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I'll also add, we have a question I'll get to in a second, but we also have a webinar on ownership transition on the CDG website, which is charettebg.com. If you go to the free learning section, Rena Klein has done a whole webinar that's recorded and it's free. And you can take a look at that if that's something you're considering. And here's a question. What are the major incentives to part ownership in a small firm? Are there any if you aren't the prime owner? Good question.
Alex, that is a $10 million question. I am so glad. That is a great question because, you know, there's two sides of this coin. There's the owner that started the firm who thinks you should just be so thankful that he or she has given you 10% ownership. And how in the world could you ever ask what that means? You should just, you know, it's my baby, I'm giving you 10%. The other side of the coin is, what does the 10% mean? Like, what does that mean that if we got to take out a loan, I owe 10% of the loan? I mean, you got to have those conversations about what ownership really, really means. I mean, owning a business is a big responsibility, and there's all different kinds of ways to structure those deals. But the answer to your question is yes, there are incentives, Alex. You know, for one, anytime a distribution is made, so if the firm is very profitable and they decide to distribute $100,000 and you own 10%, by law, you get $10,000. So, you know, there's a financial incentive. There's also the incentive that if the firm would ever sell, you know, as part of that purchase price, you participate in that as an owner. And then there are other incentives where you can structure retirement plans where based on your ownership percentage, the firm has to buy you out, you know, based on a certain valuation. There's all kinds of ways to structure that. But there are incentives to ownership, but there are also responsibilities. And you as a potential owner have the right to ask a lot of challenging questions about what that means. And the current owner should not be offended that you're doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good question.
And I guess we could also talk about ownership and leadership too, because there are firms that that name people as partners or associate partners or associate principals without an ownership stake, and they have a role in the leadership, but they have no you know, financial equity or equity at all in the firm too. It's another option.
Yeah, you do not have to be an owner to be a leader. You do not have to be a leader to be an owner, right? They should be separate in function.
Yeah. So Todd, how do you recommend engaging emerging leaders within your firm? How do you do it and why is it important?
Well, there's probably a lot of opinions about that. You know, some firms, depending upon your size and structure, some firms develop management and leadership teams where they start to involve other, you know, emerging leaders in strategic business decisions and hiring decisions and, you know, things like that. But as I said before, what I think is really important to grow your firm and grow your young talent is to really build this culture of transparency. You know, show them what the revenues of the firm are, what the expenses of the firm are. You don't have to get as detailed into salary expenses, but educate everyone in the room about what it means to run this business, involve them in that. It'll do a couple of things for you. First of all, it'll prepare people for what it means to run the firm. They'll start to get an understanding of that. The second thing it will do is people are going to start to think twice about whether they want to run off and start their own firm or not. I mean, most architects that we've met They go off to start their own firm. They're doing it because they think they want to be independent. They want to control what projects they work on. You know, they want to do their own thing. And then they wake up one day and they realize, holy crap, I'm responsible for 3 people's paycheck. And I'm responsible for cash flow. And I have to personally guarantee debt. And all of these ugly things about running a business that nobody really talks about, you know, and I encourage firms to talk about it, you know, to really educate the entire team about what it's like to be a business owner and run a business. And I think that prepares younger talent for emerging leadership. It prepares them for participating in that. I'll say one last thing about that. You know, just because you're a great architect and you've been at a firm for 20 years does not mean you should be a manager, right? We shouldn't be promoting people and making people principals and partners and all these things just because they've been there forever. Now, you can have high performers. You can pay senior architects that are really good producers. You pay, you know, Tom Brady makes more than Bill Belichick, or that's an old scenario, I guess, no longer timely. But anyway, great players make more than great coaches. So, you know, compensate your high performers. It doesn't mean that you need to promote them to management. Promote management that are good managers and have the potential to be really good leaders.
I think this is a good time to talk about it, lessons learned, and what can happen if there's too long of a gap between or too unclear of a situation about roles and responsibilities. Once somebody is named an emerging, you know, a firm leader, like, okay, you've had the conversation, you said, okay, you are now an associate principal, you will eventually have ownership in this firm. What have you seen in general, Todd, about when that gap can be too long or too unclear, and you know, what to watch out for in that zone?
It's a great question, and there's a couple of questions buried in there, I think, Emily, that you're asking. And I know where you're going with one of them. The first thing I'll say is, a lot of firms that we work with, you know, they have this resistance towards job titles and hierarchy and org charts, and they, you know, they just want everybody to be a part of the group. And I respect that. I respect that culture for sure. However, you can be too far on that side of the fence. You can be so far of, you know, we don't really believe in that, you know, people wonder who's supposed to do what, and there's, you know, chaos in the system and it's inefficient. So, I mean, I think you do have to have clear roles and responsibilities. Whether you want to add job titles to that or not is your business. But I certainly believe in adding some of those kinds of instructive language is really healthy for the operation of a firm. You need to have clear roles and responsibilities. The second question that I think you're asking is, when you talk about that gap, you know, we see firm owners all the time, you know, pat the young emerging leader on the shoulder and say, you know, someday you're going to own all this, you know, and the year goes by, and someday you're going to own all this, you know, and over the years, the young emerging professionals kind of like, you know, when is someday, and what does own all this mean? And, you know, it just takes a long time for that conversation to happen. And I would encourage firm owners that, you know, don't bring it up if you don't have a plan. You know, work on you don't have to give anybody ownership. Work with somebody like CDG or somebody else to help you develop a plan for what it means to turn over ownership, whether you're going to have them buy in, you know, or whether you're going to do it over a period of time or multiple opportunities. Develop the plan before you even bring it up with the employee. And then when you say, you know, someday, you'll be able to say, year 1, here's what happens. Year 2, here's what happens. Year 3, and the emerging leader will feel much more engaged and rewarded by that conversation than to kind of talk about these hypotheticals about ownership for, you know, for 3, 4, 5.
Okay, that's good. Let's talk about, I'm sure many people on this call are often too busy. They're probably too busy, feeling too busy to be on this webinar right now. But yes, Warren's asking if it's being recorded, and it is. So I will send a link to all the registrants as soon as it's available. So, too busy. Speaking of too busy, we often hear firms being too busy to focus on their business operations or business development. Let's start with business operations and talk about how ignoring and or neglecting focusing on the actual business of the firm, how does that affect overall profitability?
I mean, we can mathematically show you the firms that have focused on the ratios that we really put in place. and the improvement in profit by more than 10%. I mean, we improve profit with almost every firm we work with. And the way we do that is we get them to focus their time on the right things. Most firm owners have a real hard time knowing where to focus their time. They get sucked into all kinds of problems and issues. And there's a lot of times I have to say to our partners, we're not worrying about that today. We're not even going to talk about it. You know, that is not urgent. This issue is urgent. And they're usually issues related to the operations of the firm. We do look at ratios. We look at billable ratio and utilization rate as two key fundamental indicators of whether a firm is profitable or not. We could do a whole webinar on what those mean, but if you're not looking at those numbers on a regular basis and developing a culture where everyone in the firm is looking at those numbers, you're losing money. And you may not be losing money in the bottom line, but you're losing profit that you could be putting back into the firm, back into your pockets, back into the pockets of your employees or your community. I guarantee it. We know it for a fact. Not paying attention to the operations and the efficiency of the firm is costing you money.
Great. And then how about business development? What do firms need to create and nurture? Why do they need to do that in business development, regardless of if their pipeline is full now?
Same answer. You know, not paying attention to it on a consistent basis. And when I say consistent, I mean weekly. One full day a week, total hours. If you have a single firm owner, that's your day. If you have multiple firm owners, you might be splitting that day. But 20% of your time every week at a minimum spent making calls on prospective customers, sending out email, following up on proposals, you know, taking people to lunch and networking, promoting the firm. Minimum 20% of your time every single week, no matter how busy you are, no matter how slow you are. We see it all the time. Firms are super busy and they don't do business development. They wake up the next month and everything's been billed and they don't have anything in the pipeline for the next 6 months. So they run out and panic and go do business development for 2 weeks. And they get busy and they stop. And their cash flow is all over the map. Their stress level is above their head. And it just doesn't have to be that way. The firms we work with are working on business development and marketing activities, minimum of 20% every single week. Slow or busy, doesn't make any difference.
Yeah. I'm also going to add to that one point, which is you don't have to be calling, asking for work every week. 20% of your time is not, if you can't take a job for 6 months, you don't have to be calling people and saying, please give me work. That's not what these calls or these relationships are about. It's really about continuing to offer value, to keep top of mind, to let former clients and potential clients know that you care, know that you're thinking about them, checking in with them. You haven't dropped off the map. You're not just calling them when you want something, which is what happens with a lot of firms when they have to shake the bushes when they don't have enough work. And everybody can understand what's happening when that goes on. But it's just really keeping the relationship alive, and just think about it that way. Like, you read an article and think, oh my gosh, 5 of my clients would really find this helpful. Send it along. That's part of your business development activity. Oh, good question. From Alex. Business development during COVID. What are the major changes in strategy if you can't necessarily meet in person?
Yeah, another great question, Alex. I'd love to do via Zoom someday. You've got some good ones. So, there are a lot of different ideas. Some of our firms are literally doing lunches over Zoom, and they're buying lunch and having it delivered to their potential client's office. And they're saying, we just want to talk. Let's do a Zoom call. Firms are sending gifts to people that are referring business to them. So things delivered. Firms are putting on webinars, informative webinars. So for example, residential architects are doing, free webinars about the latest in solar tiles or the latest in interior design or something like that, just to attract people and keep them relevant. LinkedIn is a massive tool for staying in touch, sending out messages, staying connected. As I said at the beginning of this, most of our partner firms, save for just a few, are seriously growing. Half of them are hiring. They're very, very busy. And so they're getting work they're getting calls, but they have, ever since they signed with us, been working on it every single week, way before the pandemic. And so, we think some of that work is paying off.
Yeah, definitely. That's a very good question. We've seen it really change from 6 months ago to now. And 6 months ago or 5 months ago, people really weren't making calls at all, and kind of nothing was happening. But it seems to be getting a little bit more, more acceptable to reach out and introduce yourself to people now.
Definitely. Yeah, we froze all business development activity, for the 8-week period of March, April, probably into May. But by the time we hit June, most of our firms were starting to get active again. And it sort of seemed, certainly construction had continued. So they were still getting a lot of calls. And then now I think it's full speed ahead in terms of business development. I think it's appropriate. Yeah.
We have one more question, or I have one more question for you, Todd, but before that, I just want to say I put in the chat window, I put the link to how to, it's a link directly to Todd's and my shared calendar for a free coaching session. If anybody wants to, I really hope you do. Conversations are very much like this. Yeah. And let's talk about the last question. Because I think we just covered the kind of recession concerns question a little bit, unless you want to talk a little bit more about that. But okay, small firm leaders are required to wear a lot of hats. What do you see as critical tasks to delegate and outsource?
Great question. Virtually every firm that we meet with, at some point we dive into who's managing the daily finances of the firm, like who's doing the bookkeeping, the reconciling, paying bills, managing payroll, sending invoices. And if the answer is the firm owner, we typically say, tomorrow, outsource that. Because you just have no business doing that work. First of all, I'm terrible at it. I have an MBA and I'm terrible at it. Bookkeepers that do that work every day are super fast and efficient and detailed, and you will never regret it, I promise you. So much, in fact, that we actually launched our own bookkeeping division that just does virtual bookkeeping for small firms. If you're interested in those, just drop me an email. I'll introduce you to Kimberly and the team. But there was such a need in the marketplace for those services that we wanted to go down that path. So that's the first thing. Then the other thing is firms that are about, it's about 5 full-time billable people that you need to invest in part-time or full-time, if you can afford it, administrative support. That's about, and probably by that time you get there, that firm owner is going crazy. He or she is pulling her hair out, doing everything, and an office manager will just transform the operations of that firm. And that's stuff like getting proposals out the door, award submission creation, ordering supplies, organizing the schedule, onboarding new clients and new projects, updating harvest and time tracking software, and leading meetings on project profitability. That's an office manager can be so transformational for a small firm. And we've got many good examples. If you're interested, we've got good job descriptions and job advertisements that we created for those positions. So that's that. Outside of those 2 areas, I do think it's really helpful to our partner firms, find it very helpful for us to lead the recruitment effort and really save their time for the finalists. So if you are in a hiring mode, find some third party. I'm not a big headhunter promoter. I don't like firms that charge a percentage of the person's salary. We don't do that. It's a good time saver because a search process can take a lot of time. I've got
that could even be a senior associate, or that could be somebody who's an emerging firm leader. Could be part of the screening process. The 20-minute, the 20-minute Zoom calls.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion.
Okay, Jared has a question. How does a firm jump from sole proprietor to having employees?
Well, we encourage it. It can be done in a lot of different ways. Most of the firms that we see that do this successfully they start off by leaning on contractors to get them to the point that they're ready to hire. So we think that you should be hiring your first full-time employee. You have about $100,000 of work under contract. And you should be using a contractor less than 20 hours a week. Any independent contractor should be charging you double what you would be paying them if they were on salary, because they are responsible for all of their taxes. That you've made no commitment to them that you're going to need them next week. So it is about when you're using them, but about 50% is about when you need to start thinking about hiring them full time. And again, that's usually at 100,000 and up in work under contract, or proposals that have a high probability of closing in the near future. And let's be clear, that first hire, when you're breaking out of sole proprietor mode, that first hire needs to be 80% billable, and they need to stay at 80% billable consecutively. And the reason they need to stay at 80% billable is because that's what's going to fund your ability to go to 50% billable and then spend half your time building this business, going out and getting new business, coaching your employee now, making sure the financial structure is in place, getting the operations up and running. So you've got to have that person at 80. And it's usually the first 2 or 3 hires are those real workhorses that fund the birth of the business. We can talk about other benchmarks another time. Schedule some time to talk with us. I'd be happy to talk with you about the life cycle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We also offer an incubator program, which we should describe, since that question has been asked. It's targeted exactly to firms like yours, where we coach them. We do is it a 5 or 6 month retainer? I can't remember, Todd. But
yeah, it's 6 months, Jared. It's a 6 month incubator program. You meet with us every other week for an hour. You have access to us at any time for special projects or questions. We typically help with the screening process for your first hire, and we charge $5,000 for that program, and the sole proprietor can pay that out over whatever schedule they want over the 6 months. So they can break it up into installments, pay it at the end, whatever they want to do. And it's designed for firms that we think have the potential to become an investment partner with us. But it's just when you're a sole proprietor, it's too early. There's just a lot of fundamental things you have to do to get it off the ground. Contact us if you'd like more information.
Yeah. Entree Architect is also a really great resource. If you don't know about them, you should look them up, because they have a lot of really nice, they've got, you can pay for a membership and be part of that community, or you can just attend or listen to free podcasts, and they have Mark LePage. He's got great content that he puts out there regularly as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's see.
Warren asked a question on the panel.
Okay. Yeah, for corporate structure, small firms, do you see a preference for LLC versus partnership, et cetera?
Yeah.
LLC.
Yeah, LLC is definitely the preferred method, at least in my opinion. That's what I see. Most of them are multi-member LLCs, and they just have working agreements that sort of show the division of the ownership. Makes it easier to bring in new owners as well. I'm not as familiar with the restrictions around partnerships, but I think every firm that we work with is an LLC. Now my phone's going to start ringing all the ones that are not, but yeah. I think they are.
Yeah, we have one that's a PC, but
yeah. Sometimes.
Okay. Well, we're doing pretty well.
I lost you, Emily. Do you have me?
Okay. Yeah.
We got zoomed there for a minute.
Am I back? Okay. I'm not seeing any new questions. Okay. Well, we have the recording available. I will send it to all of the registrants. And please, I do encourage you to just sign up for half an hour with me, with Todd, together to talk about your firm, any other questions you have in depth. These are free, confidential calls. People seem to get a lot out of them. We enjoy learning more about your business as well. Anything else you want to say in closing, Todd?
Schedule a meeting with us. It's not scary at all. We don't try to sell you anything. We can tell you how it works for sure, but You know, our mission is to help small architecture firms become stronger businesses. And the more firms we get to know, you know, the more we fulfill our mission and the more we learn. I mean, every call we learn something new, and it's always a pleasure to talk to small firm owners. And keep an eye on our website. Our community continues to grow, and you know, if you have any other suggestions for us to participate in speaking engagements like this, we do this kind of stuff all the time. You can be the judge of whether we're any good at it or not, whether we know what we're talking about or not. But we're always open to invitations to speak, particularly by Zoom when it's, you know, it's super easy for us to do. Just reach out and contact Emily or myself. We'll be happy to help.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for including us on this call today. And it was really nice we had great questions. It was nice to be in front of you all, and hope to get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. And I hope everyone got some good information out of it. And I totally encourage you to take advantage of their offerings. There's no commitment. It's just another thing to help with business. And especially in these times, you got to use all the resources that are out there. So thanks, everyone, for taking the time, and stay safe out there and keep up the great projects.